this compared to bodybuilding is so much more competitive than anything. I'm a highly competitive person, but this thing, if you sleep at the wheel for even a couple months, you could be gone.
Is bodybuilding about selfies, steroids, magazines, and muscles? How do I become a successful pro bodybuilder or fitness competitor? Where do I even start if I'm new? And the biggest question of all, what are the judges looking for anyway? Even today with the internet, many people first discover bodybuilding by word of mouth. The lack of regulation has caused a boom of unqualified coaches, scattered info, biased advice, dangerous protocols, and imposing trends that are a hot mess. After 20 years in the business, I have seen it all. Week after week, I'm going to talk about taboo topics that get swept under the rug, provide you tips and strategies to gain a competitive edge and stand out on stage in any division or federation. I'm going to answer all the burning industry questions without the bias. I have competed across 6 federations, earned pro status in 3, and judged in 2. I've coached posing and choreography for men and women in all federations and divisions. I know just how much competing means to you. I'm your host, Michelle Welcome, and you are listening to the Everything Else in Bodybuilding podcast. Be sure to download your free guide, 5 Things Every Bodybuilder and Fitness Competitor Needs to Know Before Your Next Show at eeinbb.com. That's www.eeinbb.com. Welcome back to the Everything Else in Bodybuilding podcast. I am your host, Michelle Welcome, and with me today is my co-host, Vassilios Metropolis.
Oh man, here we go again.
And the topic of our podcast today is the evolution of the sports supplement industry. And I honestly could not think of a more credible source to have as a guest to talk about the evolution of the industry. So I'm going to introduce our guest, Rich Gaspari. Rich has been in the industry for 30 years. He's probably one of the best to ever do bodybuilding, in my opinion. He was a bodybuilder a top professional bodybuilder from the mid 80s through the 90s. He won the very first Arnold Classic in 1989, the Mr. America, the Mr. Universe, the professional Mr. World, and is a 3-time runner-up in the most coveted title in professional bodybuilding, the Mr. Olympia. But we're going to talk to Rich because also what resonates with me is his work ethic is unlike anybody else. And his business background is like anybody else. And Rich started a supplement line from his garage and built it to a multi-million-dollar company. So we're going to talk about the evolution of the sports supplement industry with Rich. Rich, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Can you please talk about how you got into the supplement industry? Describe your most memorable moment as an athlete as well. Something that you might still think about today.
As an athlete? Okay. Well, first off, I did start in the garage by starting my parents' garage, you know. So what got me into the supplement industry is I was always intrigued by usage of sports nutrition and products to help me excel in bodybuilding. You know, my selfishness to using supplements was a way that if I was 1% or 0.25% better in using a supplement, maybe I can, you know, it could be a place of from second to first. So in those times, you know, which is now going back into the, 90s, there wasn't much products out there. I think creatine was just developed. There were branched chain aminos. It was like cod liver oil and desiccated liver. The whey protein was like horrible because we now sell whey protein isolates. We sell whey protein concentrates that are 80%. Back in the day, there was like maybe whey protein concentrate 30%. That means there's only 30% whey protein, where the other 70% was a bunch of fillers and crap that gave you the basic craps, you know, from using them. You know, and those were the products that were available. But I always believed in using certain products. I felt, you know, creatine worked. I felt branched chains worked. Desiccated liver worked. So I used those products using, you know, various supplements to get leaner. Choline, isotal, methionine were products that I studied. And, you know, I went to university. I went to Rutgers University, and I was a pre-med student. I was I went 2 years. I was into my third year, but I was competing very young. When I started my bodybuilding career, I was in my teens. I went into the nationals and got, and just at a young age of 20, I got top 5 in the nationals. A guy named Ed Connors, who ran Gold's Gym, asked me, would I be interested in moving to California to become a manager of a gym in the Valley? And at that time, it was really, to be a great bodybuilder, you had to be in California. You had to be, to go to Venice. You had to see, all the other top bodybuilders, because in bodybuilding, I was one of those guys that was winning all the local shows. So they called me a big fish in a little pond. And for me, is like, you know what? I want to be the big fish in the big pond. So where do I go? So I moved to California, and it was a great move. I moved to California. I managed the Gold's Gym. I ended up training with Lee Haney, who was an 8-time Mr. Olympia. At that time, he hadn't won Mr. Olympia, but he saw how, you talked about my work ethic. He saw how hard I trained in the gym every day. And he's like, man, you're a kid that's like frothing at the mouth to be the best. And I became his training partner. He won his first Olympia that year that I moved to California, and I won both the Mr. America and Mr. Universe. And back then, you had to win the Mr. Universe to turn pro. There was 5 pros in the entire world every year in those days. And today, as you know, there's like 1,000 pros. You wouldn't even know who a pro is anymore. But then it was very prestigious to turn pro, because once you turn pro, pretty much you would end up competing in a pro show, which I did. The following year, came second in the New York Pro, and then third in the Mr. Olympia within the first year of turning pro.
So your most memorable, what you still think about today, is that beginning journey. That it must have been quite a feeling when you were asked to come and manage the gym over in California. What was the vibe of Gold's Gym back in that time for you? What did it feel like?
This was a new gym in the Valley, the San Fernando Valley. This was Reseda. It wasn't I got to train at the Venice Gold's Gym, but I wanted to be near Woodland Hills, where the Weider was, and I wanted to get a chance to maybe get to meet, Joe Weider, because that's what every aspiring bodybuilder wanted to do. But I mean, it was a great atmosphere. Like, the difference is like you're in a gym, and then there's all pros in there that are training, and then there's like famous actors training in there, and it's just the who's who of people that are training. The one in the Valley was a lot of actors in that gym, because it was close to Hollywood. There was a lot of just, TV actors. And, I became friends with certain actors and stuff at that time. Got to train them.
They let you train them? You didn't scare them?
Actually, one of the guys was like Robert Blake, who was Beretta. And if you remember from way back in the day, I mean, he's not that great memory now, because he was known for, like, I guess he got away from murder and murdering his wife, or his girlfriend, if you heard about him.
Wow. No.
But at that time, it was cool to get to train guys like him and other guys. One of the actors named Hunter. There was a lot of different guys. Flip Wilson. These are all actors back in the 80s and 90s that you don't hear about today, but those are all guys that I would meet and see in the gym regularly. All the Olympia competitors back then would train in this gym. This gym that was in the Valley was amazing, because I don't know if you remember a guy named Fred Hatfield. He was known as Mr. Squatty. He was able to do the first 1,000-pound squat. He trained in that gym. This guy named Steve Borden, who was actually a tag team partner with the Ultimate Warrior, was a wrestler. I guess his name in wrestling was Sting. If you remember him as a wrestler, he trained there. Jeff Everson, if you remember him back in the day, he was a writer for Muscle and Fitness. His wife, Corey Everson, who won multiple Miss Olympias, trained there. Lee Haney trained there. Albert Beckles trained there. Berto Fox trained there. And these are all bodybuilders from.
What a vibe.
Yeah, right.
So when you walk into this gym, what did it feel like?
Oh, it was amazing. It had such an amazing atmosphere, because I was so hungry. Here's the thing, I was not intimidated to move to California. I was this very just brash young kid, at 20 years old, that said, I'm conquering the world. So when I moved to California, I don't want to be disrespectful here, but I was basically saying everybody here is like a wimp, and I'm going to take over, the gyms here. And that's the way I was.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that,
So when I went there, the first thing I did is, I don't know if you remember a guy named the Barbarian Brothers. They were really big in the muscle and fitness. There was these two big guys who trained, and I trained in Venice Golds, and I was super strong on legs. I can squat almost close to 800 pounds. I did 785, and I can do reps with 500 pounds for like 25 reps. And I was a very fast paced trainer. Whatever, you remember bodybuilding named Tom Platz?
Oh yeah.
The big legs.
Yeah.
So whatever he did in the magazines, I duplicated it and did it even more to try to be able to be better than him. So when I went to the gym, I would challenge all the big name bodybuilders that I could train harder than any of these guys. And that's what people saw in me. They just saw this like hungry bodybuilder that, and I didn't have the greatest genetics. I had okay genetics, good genetics, but a lot of it was perseverance mentally. And you asked me before, like what, were the attributes of bodybuilding? I think it was just the mental perseverance I had in being the best. I had no doubt in my mind that I would be the best bodybuilder in the world, even though critics were telling me I didn't have the genetics to be the best, and to be able to become second 3 years in a row and the most prestigious show in bodybuilding, and win the Arnold Classic, win multiple contests, European Grand Prix, beating many guys with greater genetics than me, because I was the first bodybuilder to come with striated glutes, high definition that other bodybuilders have never obtained. The definition and conditioning I was in was never seen before me. And I set a new way of getting in shape that people have never seen before. And a lot of it, people asked me, thought it was drugs and all this. It was genetics. I had a genetic predisposition to get extremely lean. I could get extremely, fibrous. My muscles popped. I just, they said I didn't have a small enough waist. I didn't have a wide enough clavicle. I wasn't tall enough. I wasn't big enough. All these different things that I was told. But I just did. I looked at every aspect of what I needed to be the best, and that's having the best tan, having the best presentation, having the best, being the most ripped, hiding my weaknesses. I know in the interview we're going to talk about posing. It was just, if I stood hours in the mirror posing my body, because I wanted to show every strong point. And, a lot of great bodybuilders that were there that I was beating, they didn't know how to present themselves the way I could. So I can show my strong points, make myself look very confident, because if you're posing hours on your own in a room, with hours, you're going to be much better at showing your body, as opposed to someone that's doing it just, after they train, they do 15, 20 minutes of posing and they think that's enough. And I'm the biggest critic of today's bodybuilding, because there's so many bodybuilders that are really great, but they just don't put efforts into the posing, which they should.
I think the effort in itself is something, and I 100% respect your fiercely competitive nature. I love that. I'm very much fiercely competitive. I get it. But when you talk about the posing part, to me, that is the one part that is the most preventable. You are leaving a placing at least on the table for poor posing. I've been in the industry. I've not been in the industry as long as you, but I've been in the industry for 20 years, and my specialty is posing because of that exact reason. It's a competitive edge, and people leave it on the table. So my question to you is, why? When you know that there's at least a placement or two, or maybe more, because you're not showing off your best features, you're showing everybody your worst.
I think,
why?
I don't know how many years ago it went back that, there was a posing round in bodybuilding, and they would judge posing, and they would score it. Then they took that off the table completely. So I guess bodybuilders thought it wasn't necessary to come up with, great routines. I know it's different, like for even bikini or wellness or men's physique, they still also have to practice their turns and how they look and their presentation. They look confident on stage. And if you just do a couple minutes of it, like you said, it's the most preventable way of where you can place 2-3 places higher, and they just don't do it. I don't know if it's laziness, because you do all this training, you do this, you do all this cardio, you do this dieting, and then you don't go inside of a room and spend an hour just doing your quarter turns, doing your poses. And for me, I would spend an hour and a half in a posing room doing quarter turns, mandatory poses, and then doing my routine over and over and over. And it was funny. I'm not going to mention names, but there was like some new pros that I put them through a posing, session, and they were just dead. Me doing this to them. I said, I did this every day. And I said, you need to do this. I'm not sure if the guy was going to do this, but I go, if you want to be the best, this is what you have to do. And I'm not just sure if people just don't do it because they don't think it's necessary, or it's just laziness.
I think it's work ethic. We actually had a conversation he's a current Olympian, open men's bodybuilder, and he knows his posing needs work, but he's not working on it. And I think it is the monotony of it. And I think that drive, you have to be so laser focused, and you want to win, you need to have a winning mindset, which means if it requires you to do the same thing every day, not till you get it right, but till you can't get it wrong, people just don't have that drive and that focus like you.
I don't get it. And it's like, it seems like the work ethic of, and it's not just bodybuilding, it seems like total in the world.
I agree. 100%. 100%
and what we had from the 80s and 90s and even into the early 2000s, you had bodybuilders that really put their efforts into it, or in anything in life. You see a lot of people just want handouts, and it's just not that way. And if you want to be the best, I noticed when the current Mr. Olympia, now what's his name, the one from
Rami?
Egypt,
Rami, yeah.
Big
Rami. So what changed him the first year he won is that he spent hours posing. I don't know if you knew this. And I watched him because I was commentating the show, and I noticed he can hit the pose first and stay with it. As everyone was failing, he would stay with it last. And I said it right there with Sean Ray. I said, he practiced posing. You can see it. And he's going to win and he didn't think he was going to win the show. He's going to win the show.
Absolutely dominated. He hit that pose. He hit it and stick it. And he was the last one out of it. And he was precise with his posing. And there was no sweating, no effort. He was there to win.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. And you saw it. So you saw it. And I called it out right away. I said, he's going to win the show. And they're like, oh, his legs are too big. He doesn't have this. He doesn't have that. I go, Sean, he's going to win the show. And I was right. And that goes to show he doesn't have perfect genetics, but his presentation was so good, and he portrayed so much confidence that day on stage that's what gave him the win, in the show. And other bodybuilders, if they don't recognize that, you want to be the best. And I'm hoping it's coming back. I see more of it coming back slowly. It was almost like there was a period of time that bodybuilders, that they just didn't care about presentation. They just went on stage, but it seems to be getting a little better.
I think a lot of people are talking about it a little bit more. Even, myself, I teach all divisions, men, women divisions, every single one of them. My background started in bodybuilding. So the posing and stage performance is kind of my niche. So I actually have people can show up to posing practice every week for their division. I have it every single week for people to show up. And this is for everybody. All divisions, even all federations. So it's something that I truly believe, because I've seen it, having judged for competitions. I've seen people and I've scored people down for things that were preventable. Imagine a pro bodybuilder who can't open his lats.
Yeah. Why?
What were you doing? What were you doing for all those weeks of prep? What were you doing?
I know you're doing, lat pull downs and chin ups and rows and all this stuff to develop the body, but not to be able to present your body. And bodybuilding is all, any of these, bodybuilding, bikini, physique, they're all, it's what all the work you did is just presenting yourself on stage for that short period of time,
to
become the best. And
not being able to walk in heels, absolute fail. Yeah. That's for the women. Being able to walk in heels, being able to transition in movement, being in your body. Those are things that are a skill that need to be practiced just as much as your training, because everything on stage that you work so hard for is communicated 100% nonverbal, 100%. Yes. And you talked about Big Rami, he just jumped off that screen, and it was like, I said to Vassilios, I was like, do you see that? Do you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And that's what I saw, because I'm an old school guy. And I was just like, he really prepared himself. And he had Dennis James when he came to the United States. I think he practiced for like, I think he came in like over a month before the show. And that's all Dennis James did and he did it like he told me, because I asked him, so what did you do to prepare him? He said, any time in the day, I just get him up. Okay, we're going to pose. And he'd do like, 40 minutes. And then 2-3 hours later, okay, we're going to pose. And he kept doing that to him 3-4 times a day, just had him pose anytime, any moment, even when he was tired, after he was training, after his cardio. He said, I made him do that. And he followed my direction. And that's why he ended up, becoming the winner,
The passion that you talk about with this industry, it jumps out of the screen at us right now. And I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours because I'm obsessed with bodybuilding, obviously.
Well, we're still training now, right? Like, you're still training to do a show right now.
I know. I can't stop. I love it.
Oh, you're competing for show? You're competing for show?
I started at 20 and I'm in my 40s still competing. I love it. I absolutely love it. So I can appreciate your passion for it. And I literally could talk to you all day long.
I would be still competing if I didn't have this injury. And now that I fixed it, I may be making a comeback.
I was going to ask you, are you going to make a comeback? Oh, that'd be so awesome.
Well, I'm a little older, than you.
Come on. Where's that, Pat? Where's that winning mindset? I don't want to hear that nonsense.
Well, you know what? I'm going to see how my body comes back. And if I start seeing muscle come back, and it's exciting at least to do a transformation to show people like, look at the transformation I've been able to make, that next year I'll be 60 doing this. So
we need to build up that masters division for the Olympia, man.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
There's a 50 and 60.
Yeah.
Actually, bodybuilders in their 50s are still amazing. You can look at some of these guys that look unbelievable at 50.
Yeah. I would argue that you guys are going to have more quality. You got more time, right?
Yeah. True.
Yeah. And the way that you built your body was foundational in years and years and years of training. You didn't expedite it over 2 years of just extreme protocols. So you've got that base there that I think is also missing.
Yeah. I'm excited. Like the doctor told me not to do anything for the next 2 weeks. And it's been really hard because I almost feel like, grabbing a dumbbell and do it. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to him. I want this thing to heal, and so that I don't want to do something before, and make it worse. So yeah, I'm definitely excited about, getting back in the gym.
Awesome. So Rich, let me ask you, at what point did you decide to shift from managing this place in California to like, I need to focus on the supplement industry? Was that
okay?
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a transition. Once I moved to California and managed the Gold's Gym. And what happened there is I was managing the Gold's Gym, but I started training people because I had an entrepreneurial way of myself. And I'm like, I'm spending 40 hours a week working in this gym. I started acquiring clients in the gym itself. And I said, I'm going to make the same amount of money in 3 hours that I do in 8 to 10 hours, working at this gym. So I quit while I was living in California. I quit working as a manager, and I had an array of people that I was training, athletes that I was training, while I was also preparing for the nationals and the Mr. Universe. So I did that. I stayed in California about a year and a half after I was I won. Once I won, the year later, I went into, like I said, the New York Pro Night of the Champions, came second, came third in the Olympia, then started winning all pro shows. I went through my whole career, being a top bodybuilder, but I did start to notice this injury. When you asked me, was it time or is it like something that happened through time? I started seeing where training hard, I started seeing like my right side, just funky stuff was happening. I saw like my lat wasn't as good, my chest wasn't as good, my arm was shrinking, just weird stuff was happening. So it was actually nerve damage. And then when I ruptured the disc, and it just boom, that was the end of my career. So you asked me, what was the transition to entrepreneur? Well, while I was laying in bed with this arm that I couldn't use anymore, and I said, I can't use my body anymore, what am I going to do? I was like, I want to start a supplement company. And everyone's like, how are you just going to start a supplement company? I said, well, I became one of the best bodybuilders when people told me I couldn't do it. So now I'm going to figure out how to start a supplement company because I use supplements. I'm an avid user, and I like to make a brand, take away the guesswork in supplements, make my own brand that I can sell to individuals that want to be the best. So I started calling all different manufacturers while I was bedridden, about visiting them and seeing, that I could do my own brand. At that time, I was competing in bodybuilding. I sold everything because I no longer compete. I lost my contract. I was living pretty well as a pro bodybuilder. I had a nice condo on the water. I was driving around a Porsche, living life. I sold everything, moved back to my parents, bought a minivan, took all my assets and put it into, it was about 80 grand, and put it into buying my first products for Gaspari.
What were those products?
They were basic protein, whey protein, creatine, BCAAs. I had a fat burner, a multivitamin. I had about 5 products that I made, working with a manufacturer. I worked with several manufacturers in developing, my own brand with the little bit of money that I had left, to start this brand. Moved back, can you imagine moving back with your parents, like in your 30s, when I was super successful, people, I was a big bodybuilder. Now all of a sudden I'm going back and buying a minivan, no less, to use it to go make deliveries with, from place to place to place with this brand. And I just took it to, various gyms that I trained in when I was competing, and I brought it to stores. And at first, people were like, wow, poor Rich Gaspari, look what he's doing. He's there like trying to, sell these products. I would go to like shows and buy a 10 by 10 booth, and I'd sit there selling, my products, and people were they were more like, felt sorry for me than saw me develop. Well, they didn't see me developing a business. They said, well, this is the great Rich Gaspari, the top Mr. Olympia. And now he's sitting there, selling a product instead of being the bodybuilder that he was.
And little do you know, behind the scenes in your brain, it's like this, I bet.
I said, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. And, I know I'm starting this from nothing, but I'm going to make it. And it was, so how did I go from, starting this brand to becoming a global brand? A lot of that had to do with me traveling as a professional bodybuilder. I had so many contacts on the international side as well to say, hey, I got this brand. Would you be interested? I just started making calls and trying to get favors to get them to take on the brand. And here's one thing that I did is, who Europa Sports is, they're a distributor. And at the time it was Eric Hillman, and he was judging a lot of shows. I became an NPC judge. And one of the reasons I became an NPC judge is I can go to these shows and then set up a booth that they would give me for free, and I have myself work it, or I have, a friend help me work it. And then I would judge the show. I said, I'll judge a show for free, but I want a free booth. And I would do that just to, to sell the product. So I was sitting next to Eric Hillman, who at that time was a distributor. And I'm like, Eric, how do I get my brand into your, with your distribution? He's like, oh, you're not ready. You got to have a demand for this everywhere in the country. I know, you're Rich Gaspari, but this thing is probably only selling like in your local area. And I said, well, it is starting to sell in other places. So I'm listening to him saying he's got to hear a demand for it. They were in Charlotte, North Carolina. So what I did is I started calling all the local gyms and stores saying, do you carry Gaspari Nutrition? As somebody else, not as me.
There you go.
And I had other people call to say, do you carry Gaspari Nutrition? And the guys were like, we don't carry Gaspari Nutrition. So then I'd call and say, hey, I got Gaspari Nutrition. Would you like to get, get my product? And I started selling it that way to these guys because they go, it's funny, people are asking for your brand. So I got it in. And then Eric Hillman, I called him again. And then he's like, it's funny. I goes, there's a demand for your brand here in Charlotte. So let's take it on. So they took on the brand and they started selling it. And that's how I got into a bigger distributor. And that, it went from doing a couple thousand to doing 50,000 and 100,000.
How long did it take you to get that momentum from your minivan?
It took me about 4 years.
4 years
to get some momentum, and
how many shows did you judge during those 4 years?
Oh my God. I did every local show in the tri-state area. I would say I've done probably in my career of doing this close to 1,000 shows that I've, sat. And people always say, wow, the work ethic of Rich Gaspari, because I'd be in every show. I'd be setting it up. be the first guy to set up and the last person to leave, talking to everybody, handing out samples. And, when I traveled internationally, that was another thing. I'd set up tours and go to, say I was in UK, the guy would buy it. I said, listen, I'll visit every one of your stores if you take on my brand. So I would go store to store to store to store to store, visiting all these stores, doing a seminar, and then the products, of course, would start selling. That's how I got the brand to start selling. It was just grinding. It was just grinding as much as I could to get people to buy it. So if you ask me how many gyms and stores it's thousands that I've been able to visit. And I did this multiple times every year. I'd say, okay, now it's my Australian tour. I got to visit all the stores in Australia, all the stores in New Zealand, go there for 2.5 weeks. And it wouldn't be one store. It would be 3 stores a day. It'd be boom, 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 boom.
Were you
boom,
judging
boom.
shows? Is that how
No,
you?
then I stopped judging, but judging for me was a platform to help push my brand. That was the reason I was I love bodybuilding, but I was more like, you know what? I need to build this brand. And if I go to all these shows, there's a lot of gym owners, there's a lot of store owners that go to these contests. And that was, the reason why I did it. But after a while, I was judging right up into where the company was doing well. And then, 2 of my top athletes were Flex Lewis, multiple Olympia winner. I had Hida Yamagishi, who's still my athlete. And I ended up, judging them. And when I judged them, I had a lot of flack from people saying I shouldn't be judging because of favoritism. And it was kind of funny because when I judged them, except for Flex, who deserved to win, but when I judged like Hida, I placed him lower than what he got because I was so judgmental about, I don't want people thinking that I'm being favoritism to Hida. So I actually did the opposite and placed him lower than what he got in his placings because I was being so critical on him because he was my athlete, that worked for me. So, and then I said to Jim, I'm not judging no more. I can't judge because I got so much crap, even though it's not true. I think it's not a good idea that I judge athletes that I pay because then it's going to look like I'm, fixing the show. And I'm one out of, this judges. There's 7, there could be 5, 7, or 9 judges. You're one judge out of those people. So you're not going to make that much of a difference,
But it doesn't matter. Everybody sees that and they're going to judge you for that.
Yeah,
and then, But then, speaking of that, I mean, the industry itself has changed a lot throughout the years. And you just talked about 2 athletes that you sponsored. Can we talk a little bit about sponsorships and how they've changed since the early days? People used to give audience members who are especially new ones to the industry who have no clue, what were contracts like then and how are they evolved to what they are today? Do people still get contracts today?
I mean, there's certain bodybuilders that can still get contracts, but they're nowhere near the amount of money. I mean, Flex Lewis was our top athlete. I got him when he was an amateur and he went into making 6 figures. He had a 6-figure contract doing very well with us. I had Branch Warren also making a 6-figure contract. Bodybuilders today, because first of all, there's so many pros out there, unless you're one of the top pros. It's all about now you have these affiliate programs and athlete programs that they get discount codes and then they push the products. And that's what we use today. So you can pay athletes some money, but they're not in the 6-figure anymore. It's not like that. It's almost like if this athlete doesn't perform for you by pushing out your products through his social media and you don't see an increase in your sales, you're not going to pay him. It's totally different. And, back then, a lot of athletes had huge they could have 100, 6-figure contracts, high 6-figure contracts, like Muscle Tech was giving out to guys like Jay Cutler and Phil Heath. And those guys were making a lot of money. And
when did it change?
You don't see that. What's that?
When did it change?
I think it changed in the last couple years. First of all, the magazines started going away. Social media became more of a powerful vehicle to be recognized by. And there was a lot of top bodybuilders that weren't popular in social media, but there was these people, these influencers that never competed that were more popular than and had more followers than a Mr. Olympia. And they were getting, more attention from supplement, companies to say, let me use this guy to see how, this guy can help push my brand because he has such a big following. The whole thing that just happened was like social media. That's what happened. And it just changed so much that you can actually grow a company with multiple athletes. I look at it, there's strength in numbers. I don't need one athlete. I have 970 affiliates and athletes. Out of those, there's around 35 that I would say are, they're pros, but they're not super pros that are like in the Mr. Olympia, but, like qualify for the Olympia. And those guys are the guys I use to push the brand, that push out their social media and help sales of the brand. And because I have almost 1,000 of them, those numbers equal much bigger than one guy that would have, say, I don't know, 1 million followers that I have to pay much more money. So I think that's what changed. Supplement companies started realizing that you don't have to pay one athlete this big amount of money. And that even when they did pay these athletes big money, they didn't see a return on investment. Today, everything is about a return on investment. We're talking about the old days and today, like we used to have all these big booths. I'd have these huge booths at the Arnold, at the Mr. Olympia, that they were just huge. Spend $250,000 for a booth that I would give away just, 20, 30, 40,000 in samples, spend like 300-400 grand. And was that money coming back to me, in a return on investment? I'm thinking it is because I'm sitting there and, pushing out product, but you're only pushing out product to the audience that you have there. Maybe there's, the Olympia may have 20, 30,000 people, or the Arnold, you have 50, 60,000 people. And that's all you have to push. And a lot of those people just want free shit. They just want, and they're not really, they're going to take your product once, they're going to get your free sample. And what dawned on me as I was watching online, these people that were just collecting samples from the various booths, and in their hotel room, they're dumping this big pile of samples that they got for free. They go, I'm good for a year with all these different brands on supplements. I don't have to buy anything. And I'm like, how is that helping me?
It's adult trick-or-treating.
What's that?
It's adult trick-or-treating.
Yes, it's adult trick-or-treating. And those guys are not buyers. And it actually, I have to police the booth because those same guys would come back, take samples, come back again, take samples, come back again, and take. So I'm like, this is not working.
Yeah.
And what was the big shift was online sales. Online sales have totally changed. And, me evolving from where I was to where I am today all had to do with online sales. I went through a very difficult time with my company. I went through personal issues, going through a divorce where the judge awarded her a bunch of money that ended up putting my company to bankruptcy, which is the most horrible thing. Especially, I got my company close to 90 million. We got up to like 85 million in sales, globally. And then the amount of money that I had to pay for the divorce, I said to the judge, if you do this, it's going to put me into bankruptcy. They didn't believe me, and they put me into business bankruptcy. And
so, Rich, you go from grinding in your parents' garage with a minivan, going show to show, store to store, having people call stores.
Yeah.
I mean, absolute grind for 4 years. Build this business over how many years to the point of divorce? How many years was that time?
It was into around 12 years.
So you're 12 years into your business and you're facing a moment where it's bankruptcy. And at this point, you could sell off. That was your opportunity to sell, correct?
Actually, about 15 years. So now it's in 25. Yeah, let's go. Let's see where we're at. Yeah, but I was ready to sell off the company.
What stopped you? And how did you come out of bankruptcy to once again be the brand, one of the most credible brands in the industry?
I don't know if you realize when you go into bankruptcy that you are indebted to your debtors. You have to pay back these. You're responsible. You have a fiduciary responsibility to pay back the people you owe money to. And it's a responsibility that you have to be able to come up with something to pay them back. And through bankruptcy protection, you can pay 10 cents on the dollar on how to pay back, manufacturers, advertisers, all these different people I had to pay back. And it was millions and millions of dollars. So we came up with how to pay them back. And to pay them back, I had to take on a partner. And taking on a partner is the way I got myself out of it. But the issue was I took on a partner that made me become the minority owner of the company that I started. And that was horrible. So I had to go from that being a minority owner to a couple years in, clawing back to get more percentages of my company back, getting rid of that partner, bringing in another partner. And that's how I did to try to claw myself back up to get back the company. And, because I know this is my name, this is my dynasty. It's what I started from, my mom's basement. There's no way I'm going to give up on it. And that's kind of what I did. I didn't give up until I was able to get back what was mine. And it's not easy because it's constantly evolving, especially with the industry.
And I mean, I can attest to it as well. We ran into you. Was it Iron Religion in Florida? Was that Orlando we were in, I believe?
We were in Orlando.
Yeah. And I seen you working out. You were hanging out there. We happened to be there as well for the NPC Nationals. We got to work out in the next morning. And I remember vividly, you'd finished your workout. We were hanging out up front and you popped out your cell phone. And it was like you were 20 years old again. You set that cell phone up, you grabbed your supplement, and you were all in on selling that thing right then and there. So, I mean, it's just amazing to see that work ethic is there, that drive is still there. I mean, most people just don't have that. They just don't put that effort in. So that's pretty awesome, man. That's pretty great.
Here you are.
I don't, people ask me how do you have that? I come from, my dad was an immigrant from Italy who came to the United States, after the war. And then he had to live 10 years in Canada. He told me and then come to the United States. And my dad always told me, it's like, you got to live here in the United States. I had to, come from another country. You should be, taking advantage of this country, of what you can do here. And I guess that was just ingrained in my head that, if you don't work hard, my dad was a mason, and I see him every day coming home just like dirty from, laying bricks and blocks. And I looked at him and said, like, man, I never want to be like that, but I want to work hard. I knew I had to work hard, but I didn't want to work like breaking my back, like he did. And that mentality that, it was told me, if you want anything, you have to work for it. Nothing's going to be given to you. And that's been instilled in my head and still is today. And, that's why I look at today's, generation of people that just want things handed out. And it's just, that's not life. If you want things in life, and it's unfortunate. And I hope things do change, but I'm not sure if they will.
Not to get to the level that you're at. And how many years did it take you to go from minority owner back to, do you own it 100% now, or you still have a partner?
I still have minority partners, but it took me 7 years.
To become majority. 7 years after that. So you're over 20 years into the industry. And if you had to start over from scratch today, didn't have that amazing brand name that you have, and obviously the longevity in the sport itself, what would you say to somebody coming into that does have work ethic and maybe has a product or a service, or they have something that they want to grow and they have your work ethic? Would you tell them to go and have a booth at shows? Would you tell them to make phone calls? What would you tell them to do?
The first thing I would do is make sure you have the capital to start a business. Today, it's much harder because you need capital to market your brand, get as much knowledge as you can. Start small. Starting a business, especially a supplement business, you don't want to have too many SKUs out of the gate to make something grow, because it's going to be too difficult to maintain all those SKUs and market all those SKUs. Come up with like a couple products that you see are a need in the market, that are out there. Because if you're a person who grinds, you're going to see what's out there, and you want to develop something better. I mean, it's not developing the wheel, but how can you make the wheel better? So developing products, and there's a lot of good brands out there that they just figure out a way to make something that they feel is better for their base. Work on yourself. Work on social media. I mean, today it's without social media, you can't grow a brand. I mean, I have close to 1 million followers, and that, and guys my age that are still, I see big names in bodybuilding that they don't even have 20,000 followers because they don't work at it. I worked at building my following on social media to grow. I use it to grow my business. And take it in steps. Like, you should not grow a business and take anything out of that business until you can reap the rewards. It's like, watering a seed and having it grow. At the beginning, it needs a lot more efforts to get that thing going before it can reward you with fruit. The same thing with a business. It's like, you cannot touch the revenue from a company. It may take years before you can touch the revenue from the company. When I started Gaspari, I didn't touch the revenue from the company. I was doing personal training. I was doing whatever I could, but I never touched the money. I just kept rolling it back in it, rolling it back in it, rolling it back until it was making money. I had to get loans from my family to buy product and then pay them back. And it was there's a lot of sacrifices, just like when you're dieting for a show and you have to not eat certain foods. It's the same thing if you're starting a company. You got to be disciplined to say, shoot, I like to buy that with this money. I got all this in the bank. It's enough money. But then you're like, well, I want to grow my business and I'm going to need it to be able to, get to another level, and you're going to need that capital. So you don't spend that money, but you rather like, well, I can buy a new car if I want to, but you don't do it because you want to grow the business.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, in your personal opinion, with so many supplements out there, and you're still building your supplement company right now, for everyone who can understand, that story I told was less than 6 months ago. This was the last NPC Nationals. He's still out there hustling on his phone. So, this doesn't stop. You're right. Like he's still doing it. But with the supplements, that industry is very saturated with Amazon and just everybody popping up. How do you stay above everybody? How do you build that foundation like you were talking about, building your base and the uniqueness of your supplements? Have you found that's worked? Do you stay to the fundamentals? What you mentioned, BCAAs, creatine. Are there new supplements in creation right now? What can we expect? Like, where are you at with everything?
I mean, I redeveloped entirely new pre-workouts. If you see the pre-workout, Super Pump has been a name synonymous with pre-workouts. I was one of the first pre-workouts with Super Pump 250 and Super Pump Max that actually still sell Super Pump Max to loyal buyers who want that are like in their 30s and 40s that remember that product. When I developed Super Pump Aggression, I was trying to get the younger market, the young kid that wants that, super strong product that he sees, it had to be a little bit more taboo looking. So if you look at that label, you can see it's got graffiti on it with aggression. So I was trying to figure out, let me get to this younger audience. And everyone told me, is like, Rich, your brand is done. It's more of an older audience because you're old and you're not going to get that younger audience. So I was thinking like a kid, and I was looking at the products that were out there. And you talked about certain brands that are out there, Black Magic and all these different brands, have these cartoony, Ghost. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to use the old look with a new look to it. So we did the whole, the graffiti with the aggression. Saison was another great product. It was an all-in-one product that we sold. That was, I didn't change the formula like aggression. Aggression has, 400 megs of caffeine and other stimulants in it. It's got nootropics in it. It's a really strong product that I don't really use. I use half a scoop because it's too strong for me. But young guys want to use that type of product. I develop it for them. Saison was an all-in-one product. It contains creatine, branched chains, hydrolyzed protein, 3 different types of carbohydrates, glycerol. When you take this product, you get bigger. I changed the label of that. It was still selling, but as soon as I made that new look, I called it Get Swole with Saison, it started selling and became one of my number 1, number 2 products. The other product that was selling, the legacy product that's still now selling today, is Plasma Jet. If you remember that product, it's a pump product. It's like 4 pills you take. So I didn't really reinvent the wheel. I kind of redid the formulations, made them better, still made them a product that is not just like a commodity product like a creatine or a branched chain. It's got bells and whistles because it's unique. And because it's unique, it does sell to an audience. when I was trying to come back and I was seeing all these proteins, whey protein, there's so much of it. And back in the day, I used to use egg protein. And I was wondering, I said, why isn't there any more like egg protein out, egg white protein? I think egg whites are like one of the best proteins, but I don't see anyone selling it. And I was like asking around, oh, it's too expensive. Oh, you can't source it. So then I started looking for it. I actually found it and I flavored it. And I was like, and I know there was a couple brands that were trying to sell egg white protein. One of them was 5%. They were selling egg white crystals. I don't know if you remember that. And I tried it and I said, like, this doesn't taste good. It's got to taste good. The one thing that I made for success is not only having products that work, is also the taste. If you don't have a product that tastes good, it's not going to sell. You're going to get that hardcore user to use it, and then they're going to kind of like get tired of it. They're going to go to something else. But if you can make it effective and taste good, you'll get more sales from people outside of just hardcore people. And with the egg protein, a lot of them didn't taste good. I made it taste really good. And with egg protein, it's difficult because it's very salty, egg whites. So you can't make flavors like vanilla. It just tastes nasty. So I had to make more like chocolate peanut butter. We did a salted caramel. You know, they all had salt notes to them, so they tasted better. And that's why they sold. So now my egg whites are one of the top selling proteins because I looked at the market and I saw like, wow, this hasn't been around. Why hasn't been around? And then once I figure why it hasn't been around, let me come up with it and make it better. And at first they're telling me it ain't going to sell. And now it's like everyone wants egg white protein. So you got to look, you can't, especially guys that really make it, you can't sit up in your ivory tower. You have to stay with everybody else to see what the need is. If you're not there in the trenches, you know, what products people are looking for, listening to what products are necessary and what people are looking for, you're going to end up becoming a big brand that loses touch with the consumer. And that happens to a lot of brands. They lose touch with the consumer and then they develop like, you know, they have such a big marketing budget that they can keep going with, you know, a protein like Optimum Nutrition. That's a brand. I call it a vanilla brand. It's a basic brand that's got amino acids, protein, you know, there's other products, but there's nothing cutting edge in that brand. It's just basic. And they spend a lot of money to get that out to the consumer, and it's successful. But if you want to be able to get to the consumer, you have to be cutting edge, not to the point of being illegal, but being cutting edge and seeing what that small group of people are looking for. And then that will grow, you know, to another level.
What is your best product of all time, selling product of all time?
The best selling product of all times was my Super Pump 250. We were selling 250,000 cans a month at one point. And then the close second was Novadex, which was my test booster. We sold, you know, I sold $20 million in that product alone. It sold like crazy as one of the most successful testosterone boosters in history, you know, that sold in GNC, the number one product, Vitamin Shop, number one product. It was selling everywhere. And it was, what's great about that, it had really good margins. You know, people are also looking, you know, what do you need to be successful? Make sure that you can make enough profit you have left for marketing, you know, and then you have enough money to run the company. You know, a lot of people make a mistake that they just try to sell a product based off price. Biggest mistake is selling a product off price. You got to sell a product, cause the demand through the marketing. You know, you asked me what I'm doing today. We do a lot of the last couple of years during the pandemic when, you know, it was funny. That's when people were so afraid. That's when I was like grinding to say, okay, now it's my time to take over the market. We spent so much on Facebook, Google ads, and because you couldn't go anywhere, the way you market it was through Facebook and Google and just put those ads out. And we spent quite a bit of money that we were getting hundreds of thousands of people seeing the products. And with that, the website sales started growing. Once the stores started to open up, the brand came back into those stores. But I had to grind again, come up with new products. We came up with new fat burners, the egg protein, the new look of the pre-workout, the new look of the Saison, and, you know, just reinvent yourself constantly. If you want to be successful in today's market, you got to reinvent yourself constantly. You got to be out there in people's eyes. And as soon as you're not there, there's someone else to take your place. This, compared to bodybuilding, is so much more competitive than anything. I'm a highly competitive person, but this thing, if you sleep at the wheel for even a couple months, you could be gone.
What was your number one product during COVID? What was the most popular products during COVID?
I developed the pre-workout. I don't know why people, I guess, were still training, but I developed Detonate. I had a fat burner that came out, Detonate, and I developed the egg protein that people were using in their home gyms and stuff, the fat burner, because I said, oh, now that you've been sitting around, I got a great fat burner for you to use, from the, COVID. And it was kind of like COVID was starting to go away. And that's when we came up with the fat burner. And then we came up with a bunch of other fat burners that we came up with after that. Because
how do you come up with these? Like, these formulas? I mean,
I think of the need of what the consumer is looking for. Then I go to the formulators, and I say, this is what I want, something to do this or something to do that. Listen, I know products and I know ingredients because I've been doing it so long, but then I have formulators that will tell me, like, okay, let's mix this and that. We get to use it. I experiment with I'm always a guinea pig for all my products. I get to use all my products because I believe I'm still like you, like a hardcore person that loves training. If I use something, I want it to use it to say that it works. And from there, I just, give it to, like, now we have, like I said, 30, 40 elite athletes that I can give products to and say, hey, try this out. Tell me what you think of it, and get their input.
That's
from
good.
From the affiliate program. Once they give me good input, hey guys, what's a flavor you want to come up with? And they'll tell me, well, this is popular, that's popular, I like this flavor. And I'll go off that and then use social media to try to see, what the majority of people are looking for. But you need to stay in touch with the consumer. If you don't stay in touch with them and you just sit back, in an ivory tower, I call it, you are going to lose touch with your base of people using your products.
And quality control, I just want to touch on it briefly because of in the industry, that Blackstone Labs company was spiking their supplements and people were getting sick. So people are buying something on the internet, they're getting it in and they're trying it because there's no testing going on. So what was happening is people didn't know that the product was spiked with things that were illegal. So they got caught. Obviously, people went to jail, yada, yada, yada. So my question to you is the quality control. How is that maintained, and who is watching over and overseeing this to make sure that this quality is out there?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, a lot of upcoming companies, they get away with, remember I talked earlier, I said, you want to make cutting edge product without being illegal. But a lot of guys will take the risk of putting something in there to spike it, because then when they take it, if you put steroids in a BCAA, someone's going to use it and they're going to say, holy crap, I'm getting bigger, I'm getting stronger.
It's a heck of a BCAA.
Yeah. And then they're going to basically sell more of it. And then they say, well, let me take it out of it now that we got the sales going. Some people take that risk, and they take that risk, and it's very dangerous. And, we use all GMP facilities. I'm too much of a name that I would never get away with that. I mean, I'm looked at like under scrutiny by the FDA, by my competitors, that would, right away, I get my products, I know, tested by my competitors all the time because they want to see how they can get me. So I don't want to do that anyways. I believe in the long term. I've been doing this for 25 years. So the long term is, not doing that, because you can make short term things like that and make money short term, but it's not going to last. And that's what happened to, Blackstone and other companies that have done the same thing. If you're not making the product in a GMP facility, sometimes they end up like with Blackstone. I know they had a partnership with the manufacturer that they were able to spike it without really, people knowing, because the manufacturers were in on it too, with them.
That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. And the one thing that also makes you a little bit different too. So quality, work ethic, so we can trust your products. You said DMP or DNP facility?
GMP, good manufacturing practice.
Okay.
Those are manufacturers that get audited by, it's called the GMP certificate. The manufacturers themselves get audited by the FDA, that they follow all standards of FDA qualifications to be a practice that can be trusted in what they do. So yeah, they file all the right paperwork. When they bring in ingredients, they get them from qualified sources that they get checked. And what happens is these manufacturers get audited by the FDA and get this GMP certificate that they're GMP. And when they are GMP, then you can trust that that product is going to be up to standards.
So it's safe to say that Blackstone was not a GMP.
No, they used a smaller manufacturer, much smaller manufacturer. And you can get away with a lot of these companies. Upcoming companies that are they were just very, I don't know what's the word to say. They just took a lot of risk in growing something. And, and I noticed the sales and then there were show offs, at the Olympia, putting their faces on billboards and, a lot of stuff just, it's almost like you're breaking the law, but then you're showing off doing it as well. And of course, eventually you're going to get, caught. And a lot of stuff they were doing is funny. I was on my downfall at that time when shit was hitting the fan with me, and I was on my downfall. They were rising and what they were doing. And I'm like, how does this happen?
So you knew something was up.
I did, but I was like, I'm not the guy to sit there snitching.
No, yeah. I'm not necessarily on the back end knew that they were spiking things, but you knew that seeing their growth and how fast it happened in such a competitive market, you're like, So you knew that it was something seemed fishy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did know that. I didn't know exactly what was happening, but I did know because when certain brands, you got to remember, I'm a legacy brand that's been around for 25 years. So the growth has been here. We're not as big as we were, but we are growing, and it's great to see year after year that we're doubling in sales. And I'll be back to where I'll surpass that, that $85 million mark. That's my goal.
You heard it today, and I believe you. You're also coming out with aging products as well.
I have another brand called Gaspari Ageless. And the same reason I came up with Gaspari Nutrition was I was an athlete. I want to come up with products to help athletes. As I started getting into my 50s, I noticed things occurring to myself, aches and pains, issues with, brain fog, problems with natural testosterone, men have problems with prostate. So I looked at a lot of these issues, heart issues. I went through, I don't know if you know this, last year I had a stent put in my, in my heart because from all the years of training and just genetically, I had a blockage in one of my arteries, and I caught it just by going in for checkups. And I went to a cardiologist, and they found actually two of my arteries. One of them, which they call the Widowmaker, was 100% blocked, but my body built its own bypasses to feed my heart within the last 10 years. So it actually grew it's called a God's bypass, that it grew because I said, did I have the Widowmaker? And my cardiologist says, yeah, you had the Widowmaker, but you developed your own bypass to feed your heart. So even though that was clogged, you were still getting blood to your heart, that was just a miracle. The other one was like 70% blocked. So I ended up having to put in a stent that's, to open up that artery. And I've been on heart meds, and I feel great, and I say a lot of issues past 50 are preventable if you go to a doctor. Once you get into like late 40s, 50s, I tell all men and women to go, get what is it called? When you get your, women, they should check breasts. Men should check their prostate. A colonoscopy, I'm sorry. I got a brain fart, but everyone should get a colonoscopy after age 47, 48, and then every 5 years from there. And then men in their 50s should, especially if they, I'm not going to sit there and not admit that I've taken steroids when I competed, but I, now go to a cardiologist, and you should go to a cardiologist. And what scared me is I saw these different bodybuilders dying from issues. And I believe a lot of them are preventable if you go to a doctor. And, like mine, if I didn't get mine checked, and now that's 8-9 months ago, today, who knows? I could have, that 70% could have been 90%, and then I could have had a heart attack. So,
speaking of steroids, are you concerned with the evolution the sport has taken, specifically with men's open bodybuilding and the size, the enormous size that has evolved from all of these guys? And now you've got men in their 20s that are 300 pounds or heading up to 300 pounds. What do you think of the evolution of men's open? Do you think there is a longevity to it?
It's funny. I know that what we took back in the 80s and 90s are nothing compared to, infinitesimal compared to what the guys today are taking it. I don't even know, like someone would ask me, what would I do to be in an open show? I'd be like, I'm the wrong guy, because I have no idea what to take and how to take it, in those doses. But no, I believe it. There is a danger. It's funny. It's from my era. If you looked at my era in bodybuilding, that's like up to the Lee Haney era to the 90s. Then the next era was the Dorian era, which guys were much, much bigger. And if you look at those bodybuilders, there's been a lot, and those are bodybuilders that are younger than me, a couple years younger than me. A lot of those guys have passed, died or have issues, guys like Mike Matarazzo, who's dead. And the other bodybuilder, he won a couple Arnolds. I can't think of his name, but there's been a lot of deaths that I've seen in bodybuilders that are younger than me. But then guys from my era, like Lee Labrada, Barry DeMay, Lee Haney, myself, are all healthy. We don't have any, issues like these other guys that have a lot of issues, because I think the dosages of drugs are much, much higher. And today it's even higher. Like, I just see that they're just guys that have to be chemists to figure out how much to use to get to have that much size. And you're seeing bodybuilders in their late 20s and 30s dying, which shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be that way.
And as a female in the sport for 20 years, I think I'm the most mind blown when we were just at nationals, for example, and I'm looking at people that are amateur competitors that are female and they're not placing. They're still amateurs. They're not getting first. They're, fourth, fifth place, and they're extremely virilized. And the extreme to the women's sports, even bikini competitors, I hear so many things from competitors from bikini to just all the different divisions. And you can see the physical and the aesthetic transformations on the women's side as well. And I find it really concerning from a health standpoint. And I'm very concerned about the guys that are very young, and they're in maybe over a 2-year standpoint, it's like 100-pound increase in volume. So do you think men's open bodybuilding will have longevity? Do you think it'll be around for a long time?
I mean, I hate to disparage bodybuilding, because I love, I've been always a bodybuilder and I loved it. I do see the popularity of classic bodybuilding coming bigger and bigger. I mean, you got a Chris Bumstead, who's much bigger in following than a Big Ramy, who's Mr. Olympia Open. And I think they're a lot healthier, a classic bodybuilder. And I think people still look at them and say, wow, they have unbelievable bodies, and it's obtainable. If you look at today's bodybuilder, nobody thinks, a young kid doesn't look at a Mr. Olympia or any of the top 5 Olympians and say, wow, that's attainable. They don't know how to look like that. It's so beyond what even I ever believed bodybuilding would get to. It's like everybody looks like the Incredible Hulk. There's so much bigger in muscle
mass. Where do we go from here? Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, and then the top of it, I don't see the conditioning that we had in our day. Like, you don't see that grainy look. I mean, certain bodybuilders out there, they do. The Iranian bodybuilder, he's pretty
Hadi Chopin.
Hadi Chopin, I think, is very.
He's in good shape even right now, and we're way out from. He doesn't ever go out of shape.
No, and there's a guy that to me looks like, going back, where they still look great, but then you look at a lot of other guys, they just look like balloons, and I don't understand how I think they need to lose some of that mass to get more of the refinement. It used to be like, if your waist wasn't a certain size, you would get points taken off. You could see guys posing and they have these big guts, it's getting better, but I mean, it's still there, that I think just this ability to get so much bigger. I mean, they're looking to be 400 pounds, bodybuilders to be 400 pounds.
Can you imagine?
Before I thought it was impossible to see a 300-pound bodybuilder. And of course, Ronnie Coleman was able to do that. And I think Big Ramy is 300 pounds, which is unbelievable. Now I think they're trying to get to the next level of size that these guys are. Nick Walker is a huge, I don't want to say it, I don't know what he's doing or anything, but there's a guy who's just massive.
He is massive.
He's young. He's massive.
Yes. We've seen Derek has gotten really big too.
Derek, who won the 212. Now I guess he's going to go into the Open.
Has he announced that?
He's also massive. What's that?
Has he announced that yet? Because he's definitely massive. When he showed up and did that guest posing, it was like, where did that come from? So
they're almost telling him that he should go into Open because he could definitely do better. I mean, he'll win 212, but it's going to be really hard for him to get down in weight like that.
I was going to say, what's his weight limit? I mean, not his weight limit. What's his weight? Like, how much weight would he have to cut to bring it back?
I think he's like in the 240s. I mean, if you look at him, I mean, he's like a hottie. Hottie is not that big, but he still does very well in the Open. I think Lunsfield can do very good coming in ripped, but much fuller and bigger and still place in that top 5. If Hottie can do it, I think he could do it.
Hottie's a character on stage. I enjoy watching him. Have you ever noticed that Hottie will start so imagine there's 2 people in the center of the stage and Hottie's on the side. Hottie kind of, do you notice that he comes inward and gets closer and closer to the guys? And they try to, and I think the head judge is like, okay, move out. And he does for a second. And then he kind of comes back in.
Yeah.
He's
That's
definitely a character. You can't you can't not see him on stage.
No, he's noticeable. And like I said, he still to me brings back old school bodybuilding more so, or at least bodybuilding back, during the, I think bodybuilding's peak was during like the Ronnie Coleman era, the Kevin Levrone, Paul Dillette, all those bodybuilders at that era were just phenomenal. Every one of them was great, and that was like the peak of bodybuilding.
Do you think Sean Clarita will go to the Open, or you think he'll stay in 212 for the Olympia?
He's too small. I just think he's too small to go into the. I mean, he's amazing bodybuilder, but I think he's going to stay in that 212 and keep trying. That guy's got great density as well. I mean, I like him. He's a Jersey guy, so he's one of my favorites.
Very nice guy too. Soon to be a
very
dad,
nice.
Saw, which was great.
Oh, he's phenomenal. Such a nice guy. And he's a guy that went to one of my seminars way back. I had a posing clinic and I held this thing that I ran with my company. And he was one of the guys that came there and he actually showed it. He was like, when he first started, he was this little skinny guy. And from that to where he became is like just unbelievable.
It's amazing. So Rich, where can we go find everything about what you got going on? Where are your supplements? How do we get in contact with you?
If you want to get in contact with me, go to my Instagram at Rich Gaspari. Going to see any Gaspari products, go to GaspariNutrition.com. If you're looking for anti-aging products, go to GaspariAgeless.com.
And you're always in your parents' garage coming up with the next thing. Like that's
yeah, I haven't been. Unfortunately, my parents passed away, but I still grind and enjoy coming up with formulations. I think one of your questions like, what's the next big product? I'm not sure what that is, but I mean, if it's there, I'll find it's whatever's trending. You got to find it when it's trending.
When did these ideas come to you? Do they come to you while you're training? Is that your Zen where you kind of get the channel through, or is it while you're sleeping?
It's more like just getting out there and, going to the gym and listening to people and, looking. It's not like just one aha moment to say, this is what I should develop. It's kind of like a collaboration of, traveling around and finding, something that I see everybody's doing, just like the egg protein. It was like, where did egg protein go? That was kind of like you said, it just came in my head, one night. It's like, where did egg protein go? And why isn't anybody selling it? And then I go, what is selling that has, that have egg protein? I found like 2 brands selling it. And I'm like, well, there's no competition either. This is a stupid idea or this is a genius idea. That's the way I was saying to myself. And then I sit there and like, I don't think it's stupid. I mean, I ask people, if you had a good protein, would you use it if it was an egg protein? And that's how I just, that's how I come up with ideas.
Rich, there's 2 viewer questions. If we just take 2 more moments of your time to answer, a couple of viewers asked specifically for you to answer the questions. One person, his name is Isaiah, says, you are a legend. And he says, you were instrumental in bringing a new standard of definition and conditioning to modern bodybuilding. He says, in the years during and since your competition pinnacle, how have you felt about conditioning trends in the industry and the health effects associated with different strategies to get those levels of conditioning? We touched a little bit on it, but what would you say about it?
I mean, fortunately, I had genetics to be able to get leaner. And then once I saw that I was able to get leaner, I focused on a lot of it had to do with, of course, nutrition and diet, logging everything that I ate and looking at percentages of carbs, proteins, fats. And what worked best for me was, 35% protein, 45% carbs, 15 to 20% fat. That was kind of my standard in what I ate to get myself, believe it or not, ripped. I never followed low carb diets, but that was my body that it worked well for me. I mean, today's standards, I mean, I don't know if you saw, there was one of these podcasts that it had Ronnie Coleman, it had Dorian judging Brandon Curry saying, what do you think of this guy? And they said, this guy wouldn't even place in the top 5. And he, back in the day, because he wasn't hard enough, he's 2 to 3 weeks out, all these things, because what we talked about earlier is a lot of bodybuilders are just trying to be so much bigger, sacrificing that density that the other bodybuilders had. Even, from Ronnie Coleman to Dorian Yates, they went from what I look like and got themselves bigger and shredded, as well, with striated glutes. So that's why I say that was the peak of bodybuilding. I'm not sure of what's going on because, like I said, I'm not familiar with the type of supplements or drugs that bodybuilders are taking to be able to obtain that hardness. I knew there was a couple of bodybuilders that were using certain products that, what's the one product they were using that was actually like Andreas Munzer used it it was like a bug killer. And what it did is the way it worked, it would heat up the inside of the bug and melt the insides. And if you use just a small amount of this, if you increase your core temperature,
DNP,
yeah, that's it, DNP. Using that type of product,
so dangerous.
That's one of the most dangerous. And I was reading about because everyone thought I was using that when I was competing, and I had no idea what that was. But they're using some. So what is this? It's a bug killer, and what it does is it increases the temperature inside the bug, so that is the insides melt. But if you can increase your temperature core, you're going to burn more fat and you're going to get more ripped. But then I guess Andreas Munzer took too much and it melted his organs, and he died.
Yeah, you can't. Jesus. If you take too much, there's no coming back from that.
So I'm not sure if DNP is still around today.
It's still around. I don't know if people are using it
to use
regularly.
It to get ripped. But to get ripped.
People use a lot of diuretics, like multiple diuretics, and there's a lot of the organ failure that is happening from that.
Yeah, and I never believed in diuretics as well, because if you take all the water out of your muscle, you're going to look like a deflated balloon.
Yeah, we just had Dr. Guillermo Escalante on the show, and he wrote that Peak Week strategy, that paper about Peak Week. It's been documented, and that was pretty fascinating. He was on saying nobody should ever use a diuretic. You do not need a diuretic. You're just not lean enough.
No, that's something that I always found I always found that I had to be ready 2 weeks out from a show. And then what I did is I slowly filled my body back up with glycogen. I slowly, I would almost get to an overtrained state 2 weeks out from the show. And then from there, slowly fill back up. And that would work best for me. I never had to do anything drastic. I never carb loaded, sodium loaded. I just would slowly just go into the show because it was already ripped.
Strategic, focused, driven, counted your macros, you probably paid attention to everything, had a log. That's a champion.
Oh, thank you.
That's a champion. One more viewer question and I'll let you go. I could talk to you all day long, Rich. You're just saying wealth of knowledge, and I could gossip about the industry just on and on and on. Because, who do you talk to that knows what I'm talking about, right? What do we talk to? Yeah. So one more question. I know, we just talked to each other. So Jennifer asks, how do you decide what supplements to create first, meaning protein powder over vitamins? So if you're somebody who's just getting into this, what would you recommend are the basic staples for the supplements that they should take?
Well, when you look at
Gaspari
products,
supplements, that is.
Yeah, when you look at supplements that you're making, the one thing bad about, everybody uses a protein. The problem with protein, it's saturated, and the profit margins you make on protein is very, very little. So protein should be the last product you come up with, when you start a brand. I came up with, when we talked about when I started my brand, it took me, I guess, close to the 5th year before I developed Myofusion, a protein, because I was selling all these other products that were bringing in more capital to the brand. So if you're going to come up with a product, you got to come up with products that, 1 or 2 products that you think, there's a need for, but also you can make a high profit. Because if you have a high profit, it's going to help stage you to, develop other products from the profits that you make. You want to have healthy margins. So if you develop a protein, you will be screwed because the protein is so competitive, and besides just flavoring, which could differentiate you, it's very hard to say like my protein's better than this protein, because they're all kind of the same. If you have an isolate or if you have a WPC80 or a hydrolyzed protein, they're all basically the same. The only thing differentiating them is the flavor, different flavors and stuff, but you're not going to make any margins. So for, this person, I would definitely try to develop something that you feel there's a need for, or that you're going to change, like a pre-workout or a fat burner. But also those products have higher margins that they can become your flagship products to build the brand.
Now, this person's a consumer, so she's getting into bodybuilding, considering doing her first show. She goes to Gaspari Nutrition's website, which is GaspariNutrition.com, right?
Yes.
Okay, so she goes to GaspariNutrition.com. She goes to your supplement line. What would you tell her are the top supplements that she should incorporate into her nutrition and to help her along her competition journey?
One of the top supplements I sell is believe it or not, is my multivitamin. It's called Anavite. Anavite is 3 products in one. It contains all the essential vitamins, all the essential minerals, but they're chelated minerals, so they're even better bioavailable. We also have 3.2 grams of beta alanine, which the studies show that the 3.2 grams and above will help lower lactic acid, so it'll enable you to train harder, longer. We also have 2 grams of carnitine in Anavite. So carnitine has many great effects in burning fat, increasing energy within the cellular level. So that's the one product I recommend to everyone. And it's, believe it or not, it's my number 1 product is my Anavite multivitamin. Number 2 is, taking on a good protein, a basic protein, whether it's, my Myofusion or my egg protein, or you're a vegan and you want to use vegan protein. We have a proven vegan protein. Get on a protein because you want to have multiple meals. You're going to try to eat, 5 to 6 meals a day. So taking in 2 proteins, and I always say supplements are supplements. Don't substitute them for food. A supplement is a supplement. So you using, and it's hard for people to, if they're into training, to eat 6 times a day, just food. So take a protein. So you have your vitamin, your protein. Then from there, I would take something for recovery. So that would be a branched chain amino acid. We have a proven EAA, which is essential amino acids, or amylase, which is our straight branched chain amino acids. Then if you're really serious, then from there, maybe getting into a pre-workout, to use. But the basics should be protein, vitamin, and BCAAs, those 3 products. If you have a budget, and then after that, you can use pump products, you can use pre-workouts. There's so many other products, you could take.
So they would find all of that on GaspariNutrition.com. And Rich, I can't thank you enough for spending your time with us today. You're just a wealth of knowledge. I love your work ethic. I love everything about all the discussion that we had today. Can't thank you enough. So once again, please tell everybody where they can follow you on all your social media platforms, because you do have quite a presence everywhere.
Thank you. Again, at Rich Gaspari on Instagram. I'm actually Rich Gaspari 88 on TikTok. I started a TikTok account. I'm on Twitter at Rich Gaspari. But then, like I said, for the products, you go to GaspariNutrition.com or you go to GaspariAgeless.com.
Wonderful. Thank you again, awesome. Rich. We appreciate your time today.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. I had fun.
Ever wonder if you are posing correctly for your division? Learn to Pose is dedicated to taking out the guesswork on how to pose for all categories in bodybuilding. Learn 5 ways you can improve your posing skills in 5 minutes guaranteed at www.learntopose.com. There are free posing tutorials available for the bikini, figure, and men's physique categories, and more on the way for other divisions in bodybuilding. It's free, so go access your free posing tutorial for bikini, figure, or men's physique at learntopose.com.